Welcome to Tradition and Sanity. Rounds, Grounds, and Other Forms from Four Composers. A Wild Ride Through 700 Years of English Music by Julian Kwasniewski. Read by the author. Each country has its distinctive musical tradition. England's is one of the richest. Continuing my exploration of various periods and styles of music, in this article I'll take you through 700 years of English music by introducing you to four musical giants: John Dunstable, William Byrd, Henry Purcell, and Benjamin Britten. With each composer, we'll examine a particular technique that his piece might be said to epitomize. Buckle your seatbelt. It'll be a wild ride. John Dunstable's Suite Thirds and Horoscopes, 15th century. A transitional figure between the medieval and Renaissance periods, John Dunstable, circa 1390 to 1453, is the most famous English character in late medieval music. Almost nothing is known about his life, although it seems he was not a cleric, which was unusual for most of the musicians in his day. Dunstable was likely a married man, and upon his death was eulogized not just as a musician, but as one well versed in mathematics, astronomy, and even astrology. One manuscript contains astrological drawings which may be by Dunstable himself, and another contains copies of Boethius's De Musica and De Arithmetica, both of which appear to be copied in Dunstable's hand, along with various excerpts on horoscopes. I love stumbling upon interesting details about medieval lives. Rodney M. Thompson notes in the winter 2009 issue of the Musical Times that Dunstable was in the service of Joan of Navarre, Henry IV's second queen, probably not long after her husband's death in 1413. He is known to have received from her a valuable cup as a New Year's Day gift in 1428. Dunstable's influence stems primarily from his use of continence anglaise, or English manner, a polyphonic style in which the harmonies are based on the consonant third and sixth. On the continent, thirds and sixths had been generally frowned upon due to medieval theories of musical mathematics. The intervals were not as pure in their ratios as octaves, fourths, and fifths. This innovation of broadening the harmonic palette was hailed as strangely sweet by continental ears. Notes Thompson dryly, Dunstable is a rare example of an English composer who impressed the French. And this is encapsulated in the origin of the term continence anglaise itself, coined by the French poet Martin Lafranc when describing the music of the early 1400s to Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy. Quote, "They, the French composers Dufay and Binchois, took on the guise of the English, and follow Dunstable, and thereby a marvelous pleasingness makes their music joyous and remarkable." Period. You can hear these intervals in one of Dunstable's famous motets, Quam Pulchra. Bar 1 opens in unison before the top voice jumps to a third, the C and the E. Then the next chords in measure 2 both consists of thirds and sixths, and so on. Cantus firmus. One unique medieval technique which died out during the Renaissance is the practice of singing different texts at the same time, giving vocal lines their own and somehow related words. Dunstable masterfully sets the Pentecost hymn Veni Creator Spiritus over the top of the Pentecost sequence Veni Sancte Spiritus. Note the lower two voices carrying the hymn text in slow motion, while the upper voices dance with the more wordy sequence. Following the practice of cantus firmus, the lowest voice takes the melody of the chant, lengthens it, and then breaks it up as necessary, in order to fit the rest of the polyphony. I've marked an especially clear passage below. The highlighted notes in the image in the score to the left match the pitch changes of the same phrase in the chant to the right, but slowed down and sometimes broken with a rest. See the Substack article for the diagram. Harry and Lizzie's Tunes, 16th century. The 16th century is so rich in important composers it seems a crime not to mention more. From Byrd and Tallis to Dowland and Gibbons, Byrd takes the prize, and provides an excellent opportunity to discuss rounds or canons. Before we get there, however, I think a brief word is in order on the two English monarchs who dominated that century, both of whom were intensely musical and somewhat insane. Henry VIII was a skilled musician, singing and playing the lute as well as various keyboard instruments. A few songs are even attributed to him, the most famous being Pastime with Good Company, also known as the King's Ballad. This ballad describes the leisurely activities of the court, including singing, dancing, and hunting. Henry praises these pastimes with good company as a remedy for vice which flows out of idleness. It's not entirely convincing as autobiography, but we'll let that pass. In the concert linked in the Substack article, Pastime with Good Company recurs in between other music likely heard at Henry's court. Here's an excerpt. Henry's daughter by Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth I, also played the lute. During her reign, the High Renaissance in England was in full swing. From Shakespeare to Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes, the island of England was teeming with great minds and fine musicians. Many compositions were written to flatter her, and she was graced with numerous literary allusions, often referenced as one or another Greek goddess. Good insurance at a time when monarchs were very much inclined to send anyone who displeased them to the gallows. In this hilarious madrigal by Thomas Wilkes, the lyrics speak of Vesta, the Roman goddess of the hearth, meeting the maiden queen fair Oriana, wink for Elizabeth, the so-called Virgin Queen, along with a company of Diana's nymphs and shepherds. As Vesta was from Latmus hill descending, she spied a maiden queen the same ascending, attended on by all the shepherd swain, to whom Diana's darlings came running down amain. First 2 by 2, then 3 by 3 together, leaving their goddess all alone, hastened thither, and mingling with the shepherds of her train, with mirthful tunes her presence entertain. Then sang the shepherds and nymphs of Diana, Long live fair Oriana. The madrigal includes numerous instances of word painting, where the music somehow mimics what the lyrics are speaking of. For example, when Vesta descends, the tunes flow downward. When the characters ascend, so does the music. Even more clearly, on first 2 by 2, only 2 voices sing. Then 3 by 3 is a trio, and when they leave their goddess all alone, the soprano sings it all alone. Voces 8 sings it here from memory, with lots of hammed-up rhetorical gestures.
First two by two, first two by two, then three by three, then three by three, together, living and goddess. Hasten thither, and mingling with the shepherds of the train, with the Then sang the shepherds and nymphs of Diana, nymphs of Diana,
Rounds of cannons. Back now to the avian songster. Byrd excelled in compositions of great complexity, from polyphonic masses to instrumental fantasias to keyboard dances. His musical genius also allowed him to do something deceptively simple, compose excellent rounds. A round, or a canon, is a composition in which a single melody, sung by people entering at different times, lines up in a way that harmonizes. The melody of a round is composed having in mind how it will overlap on itself, so that the contemporaneous notes in later measures will correspond well with the earlier measures they are sung on top of. Byrd did not invent rounds. They are very ancient, and in fact the earliest extant piece of music in English is a form of round. Sumur is ikumenin, pictured as the background in the header to this article. You can listen to it in a link in the article. Perhaps the best known round to English speakers is Row, row, row your boat. Non nobis domine is a round sometimes attributed to Byrd. I include it here since it's very simple to grasp. In the article, you can see a diagram where the first and the third voices sing the same melody, at the same pitch, 6 beats apart, while the middle voice sings the melody transposed down a fourth, but otherwise unchanged, starting 2 beats after the first.
Non nobis nobis domine nos nomine sed nomine tuus sed nomine gloriata nomis sed nomine tuus sed nomine gloriata nomis nobis domine.
Rounds or canons don't need to be as simple as that, however. They can be combined with other elements to yield a more complex whole. In Miserere mihi Domine, a Compline antiphon, Byrd hides a canon and a cantus firmus among other polyphonic voices, which are neither. In yet another virtuosic piece of part music, Byrd includes a quotation from Greensleeves, a Galliard or triple-time dance section, and segments of a canon. The imitative entrance at the beginning is clear in the first and fourth lines. The canon isn't strict in this piece, but there are many instances of canon fragments being worked into the texture to enrich the piece. Here's an excerpt from my favorite recording. Groovy Grounds with Henry Purcell, 17th century. A ground is a composition built upon a repeating bass line, over which the composer cleverly writes upper changing lines, repetition of the bass with his inventiveness in the vocal line, and sometimes tricking the expectation of the listener by making the natural cadence of the ground occur in the middle of a phrase in the melody. A visualization will help, and you can find this in the Substack article. In Henry Purcell's aria Dido's Lament, the ground bass is 10 notes long. G, F sharp, F, E, E flat, D, B, C, D, G. Sometimes Purcell will break the penultimate D and drop it an octave, but that doesn't really change the harmony. The yellow highlight is the ground's first appearance, the green is its second iteration, the blue is its third repeat, and so forth. You can see that the voice comes in with the beginning of the bass in measure 14, but it starts over again in the middle of the same sentence in measure 19. This aria is from Purcell's opera Dido and Aeneas, based on Book 4 of Virgil's Aeneid. A tragedy, the story deals with the love of Dido, the queen of Carthage, and her despair when her lover, the Trojan hero Aeneas, abandons her to go and found Rome. It is Dido's last aria, in which she speaks of her imminent death through heartbreak. In the preceding recitative, music sung quickly like speech in an opera, she says to her servant Belinda that death is a welcome guest, before launching into the aria where she asks to be remembered but her fate forgotten. At that point, the ground bass starts. Here's the text. Recitative. Thy hand, Belinda, darkness shades me. On thy bosom let me rest. More I would, but death invades me. Death is now a welcome guest. Aria. When I am laid in earth, may my wrongs create no trouble in thy breast. Remember me, but ah, forget my fate. Remember me, but ah, forget my fate. The ground highlighted above is highly giving a feeling of floating darkness. The commentary provided by the ensemble is enlightening. Quote, the meter and lines of the opening recitative are striking. 4 fragmented lines of text with syllables of 9, 7, 8, and 7 are reinforced with mismatched words which do not easily form a meter, creating a metrical dissonance. The disintegration of the formal conventions of poetry mirrors the imminent destruction of Dido. The tension and dissonance of the conflicting meters and lines is only resolved in the last line of the aria, which is classical iambic pentameter. Remember me, but my fate. The repetition of the last line creates the impression, both musically and textually, of a heroic couplet, accentuating the closure of Dido's fatherhood. Here is their striking performance. And here the ground starts. With Dido, the dissolution is subtle. In another work by the same composer, a weirder tactic is adopted. In Purcell's 1691 opera King Arthur, the spirit of winter appears and sings an aria in which he describes his frozen state and asks why he has been awakened. As it turns out, it is Cupid who will melt him, and the winter spirit, like genie, admits that he has been warmed by love. Before that, however, the cold spirit complains of being wakened. What power art thou, who from below Hast made me rise unwillingly and slow, From beds of everlasting snow? Seest thou not how stiff and wondrous old, Far unfit to bear the bitter cold, I can scarcely move or draw my breath? Let me freeze again to death. The vocal line is broken like someone panting, with the strings shivering on accompaniment both weird and awe-inspiring. Here is countertenor Andreas Scholl's masterful rendition.
Hast made me rise unwillingly and slow through Seest thou not how stiff and wondrous old far unfit to bear little cold. I can scarcely move or draw my breath. Can scarcely move or draw my breath. Let me free again. Let me free again to death. Let me free again to death.
This cold song is also a ground, but let's end on a more upbeat note. Purcell was quite capable of this. Here's a third ground. Here the deities approve, describing a mythic paradise, a great assembly of Apollo's race. Here the deities approve, the god of music and of love, all the talents they have lent you as they have sent you, pleased to see what they bestow, live and thrive so well. Reginald Mobley, a Grammy-nominated singer, does a superb job here with theorbist Brandon Aker.
approve, the God of music and of love. Hear the deities approve, hear the deities approve, the God of music and of love. All the talents they have lent you, all the blessings they have sent you, pleased to see what they bestow. Live and thrive so well below. Pleased to see what they bestow. Live and thrive so well below. All the talents they have lent you, all the blessings they have sent you, pleased to see what they bestow. Live and thrive so well below. Pleased to see what they bestow. Live and thrive so well below.
Benjamin Britten, 20th century. My next British composer leads in a funny way directly from Purcell. The main composition of his that we'll look at here is based on a theme of Purcell's. As a modern composer, he will provide some good variety among all this early music. Benjamin Britten was born in Suffolk, England in 1913. A fairly ordinary boy in the English school system, he was musical from an early age, studied at the Royal College of Music, and subsequently pursued a career which spanned America and England. A pacifist, he spent a large portion of World War II in America, but finally gained exemption from military service. He composed operas, song cycles, symphonic works, and chamber works, and founded the Oldborough Festival, now a world-famous classical music gathering. His War Requiem was commissioned for the reconsecration of Coventry Cathedral, destroyed during World War II. It intersperses traditional Latin Requiem texts with poems by the poet-soldier Wilfred Owen, killed in action just a week before the armistice of World War I. It's not a work I'm very familiar with and one I'd like to study more. A video of Sir John Eliot Gardiner conducting it in 1993 can be found in the Substack. Gardiner is a brilliant musician who stumbled into conducting while studying history and subsequently was known for achievements in that domain. The entire orchestra in tuxedos is hardly seen today. Benjamin Britten often composed with particular musicians in mind, including Julian Bream, one of the early pioneers of playing the lute in modern times. Britten's father refused to have a gramophone or radio in their house, making our composer one of the last to be brought up exclusively on live music. Theme and Variations. A longtime concert favorite, the title of Britten's The Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra tells you most of what you need to know about the piece. Fugue on a theme of Purcell, Britten's 1945 Opus 34 is a playful romp through the various instruments of the modern orchestra. Musically based on Purcell's Rondeau from the Abdelazer Suite, the opening of Britten's work is a nearly exact the Baroque piece. It quickly descends into modulations that are unmistakably modern, before entering on a theme and variation cycle that moves through individual instrumental sections: winds, strings, harp, brass, percussion. The specific groupings of variations start with the higher instruments of a particular category and move to the lowest. Thus, for the strings, he starts with the violins with the double basses. It was originally commissioned for a film with the same goal as suggests, and you can listen to the music with the charmingly old-fashioned original narration in a link I provide in the article, read by none other than Sean Connery of James Bond fame. The performance version without narration on top of it is slightly different and, not surprisingly, more often performed in the concert hall. The Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra entered the musical imagination of modern point that there have even been two jazz parodies of it, one by Duncan Lamont and the other by Mike Westbrook. For those with an affinity to jazz, you can catch some of Lamont's version in a link I provide in the article. The final component of Britten's effervescent work is known as a fugue. Similar to the round or canon, a fugue is a composition that involves multiple hitting each other with the music based on the same melody. The fugal melody. Sometimes the repetitions overused, sometimes they get modified. In Britten's piece, the fugal melody is rather quite different from the Purcellian theme. With his usual musical brilliance, Britten then combines the two, overlapping the fugue on top of the theme. Here's an excerpt from the opening of the piece. I'll have more on Britten in another piece, but for now you can become a child again if you need a refresher on your orchestral instruments. Thank you for joining us on this romp through the musical fields of Merry England. Let us know in the comments what you think of the music and if the score illustrations were helpful and contributed to your enjoyment of the music. In consideration of the work that went into this article, musical research, diagrams, and voice-over recording with samples, please consider putting $15 or $25 in my tip jar. You can find the link to the Buy Me Coffee page at the bottom of the Substack post. A big thank you to those who have donated in the past. I truly feel that my writing has been seen and is appreciated. Thank you all.